Have you ever met one of those people who claim to be a Christian, but you don't really see the fruit? Like, they say they have the joy of the Lord in their heart, but best you can tell, it's way, way, way down deep in there and doesn't really shine through the surface. A couple years ago, I was standing in line at Best Buy waiting to check out, and I was behind this woman picking up an order, and she was being so incredibly rude to the guy at the counter. She was impatient, she was demanding, and while he's bringing her order up to the front, he misreads the label and calls her by the wrong name by mistake. And she just absolutely unloaded on this kid. I mean, berating him for what she called poor customer service and laying into him. And to his credit, he was incredibly kind and very apologetic, and he hands her order and tells her to have a great day. And as she's turning to leave, she stops and she reaches in her purse and pulls out a gospel tract and shoves it in his face and says, "Here, you need this." Just as rude and hateful as everything else that she had said, and then she just stomped away. I want you to sit with that image for just a second, because there's a lot happening here, all right? In the span of about 2 minutes, this kid saw what he probably thought was what a Christian looked like up close, right? And she was not a very good representation of the kingdom. And I would love to tell you that I stepped up, that I walked to the counter and said, "Hey, listen, that was not okay. She does not represent Jesus. That's not what a Christian is supposed to be." I would love to tell you that we had some kind of great redemptive moment and like he came to know Christ and it was rainbows and butterflies and wonderful, but I didn't. I actually said nothing. He was clearly rattled and hurt, and I told myself that I didn't want to make the situation more awkward. Y'all have met me. You know that I can make any situation awkward, and I didn't want to make it worse. And I told myself that bringing it up would just make him more uncomfortable, and that the kindest thing that I could do would be to let it go. And the kid took the tract, and as you might expect, he didn't open it. He just tossed it right in the trash. And I watched it happen. And I picked up my stuff, and I walked out. And here's what I've thought about ever since that day. That woman was visible. I'll give her that. She was salt and light, just the wrong kind. Salt poured in an open wound, and light that blinds instead of guides. But me, I was not the good guy in the story just because I was polite. I was invisible. And Jesus is going to show us today that invisible is its own kind of problem. Here's what I think is actually happening with a lot of us. We have watched people like that woman growing up, or maybe we were that person at some point, and somewhere along the way we made a deal with ourselves. We've said, I never want to be like that. I never want to be the person that turns faith into a weapon. And that's a good instinct, and it comes from a real place, but somewhere between I don't want to be obnoxious about Jesus and where a lot of us have actually landed, we didn't just dial it back, we went quiet. Completely quiet, and a lot of us have been there ever since. And here's the thing, we have really good reasons, don't we? We've been in the conversations that went sideways. We've watched relationships get weird. We've seen what happens when faith gets politicized and weaponized and turned into a culture war, and we shouldn't want anything to do with that. It's not healthy and it's not helpful to the kingdom. And a lot of us are tired. Some of us have been hurt by the church. Some of us have hurt people in the name of the church, and we have to carry that. So we made a choice. Maybe not consciously, but we still made it that the safest version of faith is a private one. Here's the thing, church. We have confused humility with invisibility. Humility says, I don't have to be the loudest person in the room, but invisibility says, I don't want anybody to know that I'm in the room at all, right? Humility is a virtue. Invisibility, frankly, is a cop-out. And what we're going to see today is that you were not saved to blend in. You were saved to shine out. Think about the people in your world right now, your coworkers, your neighbors, the people you see when you drop off and pick up the kids, the people who are with you in your everyday life and see you throughout the week. How many of those people know you follow Jesus? Not just how many of them have heard you quote a Bible verse or know that you go to church on Sunday, but how many of them have seen something in your life that made them want what you have? How many of them have watched the way that you handle a hard season and thought, man, I want whatever it is that they've got? Because what I've come to believe and realize in years of ministry is that people around us, for the most part, aren't hostile to Jesus. They're just not really seeing Jesus. Not in a way that's real, not in a way that's close enough to touch. This morning we're in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 5, and we're picking up right in the middle of Jesus preaching the Sermon on the Mount. And what's important to know before we read this passage is that Jesus has just finished what is called the Beatitudes. He's described what his people look like on the inside, the hunger and the mercy, the mourning and the peacemaking. And now he flips it around and he shows us what that's supposed to look like on the outside. So take a look with me, Matthew chapter 5, verses 13 through 16. Jesus says, "You are the salt of the earth. But if the salt should lose its taste, how can it be made salty? It's no longer good for anything but to be thrown out and trampled under people's feet. You are the light of the world. A city situated on a hill cannot be hidden. No one lights a lamp and puts it under a basket, but rather on a lampstand, and it gives light for all who are in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father in heaven." A powerful image painted by Christ for us this morning. But go back with me for just a second to the beginning of this passage, and I want you to look at the first two words of verse 13. Jesus says, "You are." Not "you should be," not "try to become," not "one day if you finally get your act together," but "you are." Spoiler alert, you're never going to get your act together, all right? Jesus is not giving his people a project here. He is announcing an identity. The Beatitudes that he's just preached describes what kingdom people look like on the inside. And then salt and light, they show what we're supposed to look like when that walks out the door. It's not a goal to work toward. It's a description that's already true about anybody who has placed their faith in Jesus and been genuinely transformed by him. Which means that the problem for most of us isn't that we need to become something different, it's that we've been hiding who we already are. Now, when Jesus says salt of the earth, he's not just talking about seasoning, all right? We think of salt as something that just makes popcorn better, and it does. Lots of butter on it too. Don't listen to that, Laurel. I didn't say that out loud. Laurel Hart manages my diet, and I'm going to get talked to about that after this. But he says that salt is something that makes life better. In the first century, salt was survival. Before refrigeration, salt was how you kept meat from rotting. You packed it in salt. You preserved it. Salt was the thing that stood between rot and decay and something actually being preserved. And so it was so valuable that sometimes Roman soldiers were even paid in salt. It's where we get the word salary from that we use today, in fact. And so when Jesus says you are the salt of the earth, he's not saying that you make life just a little more flavorful. He's saying you are a preserving force. You are the thing that slows the rot. So think about that in the context of your workplace and your neighborhood, your family. The world has a decay problem, loneliness and bitterness and despair and division. I mean, just scroll through Facebook for 5 minutes and you'll see it everywhere, right? It's exhausting. And Jesus says that his people are the preserving agent in the middle of it. But then he asks an uncomfortable question. He says, if the salt should lose its taste, how can it be made salty? See, in the ancient world, impure salt mixed with other minerals could lose its potency over time. And Jesus says it plainly. He says, it's no longer good for anything but to be thrown out and trampled under people's feet. He says you just throw it out. He's not talking about losing your salvation here, but he is talking about losing your function. A follower of Jesus who has so fully blended into the culture around them, who can't be distinguished by their values or their priorities or their presence, that person has lost what's made them useful to God's kingdom. Not bad or condemned, just ineffective, flavorless. I don't know about you, but I don't want that to be a descriptor of me. Church, we weren't saved to blend in. But then, Jesus shifts the image. Look at verse 14. He begins by saying, you are the light of the world. And he does something interesting here. He doesn't say you should shine. He says a city situated on a hill cannot be hidden. Think about that. A city lit up at night on top of a hill. You can see that from miles away, right? You don't have to search for it. It's just there. And then he gives us the image that I think should make a lot of us pretty uncomfortable. He says in verse 15, no one lights a lamp and puts it under a basket, but rather on a lampstand, and it gives light for all who are in the house. Take a second and really picture that. Imagine lighting a candle and putting it under a basket. It doesn't make any sense, right? Why would anybody do that? Nobody does that. That's a fire hazard. Please don't do that. David Watkins is here. He's a firefighter. He says amen. He doesn't want to show up at your house. The whole point of a lamp or a candle is that it gives life. Covering it defeats the whole purpose of lighting it in the first place, right? Jesus is saying that a Christian in hiding is like that basket-covered lamp. And here's the thing about darkness. Darkness isn't actually a thing. It has no substance. It has no power of its own. It's simply the absence of light. You can't push darkness out of a room. You can't argue with it. Well, you could, but you'd just be talking to yourself. You can't organize against it. You just turn on a light and it's gone, right? Your presence, your actual presence in the dark places of the world, it's not an argument. It's not some fancy church program. It's not a strategy. It is simply an arrival. And when you arrive carrying the light of Christ, something changes. Not because of you, but because of what it is that you're carrying. That light that you carry with Christ. We are saved, friends, to shine a light to others. And here's where this connects directly to who we are as a church. At the beginning of the year, I shared that our vision for our church this year is that we would grow in intentional discipleship. And I want us to really think about that for a second, because I think many times we picture discipleship as something that happens primarily in this room. We show up on Sunday and we hear a really great message from a really great speaker who's incredibly handsome and very humble, and we love him so much. I'm talking about Michael Weil, not myself. And then we think that's it, right? Or we think that maybe discipleship extends to a small group or some kind of class. And those things are not for nothing. They are incredibly important for the life of a believer. We have small groups that meet on Sundays at 9 a.m. right in the building next door. You should go. They're great. But look at how Jesus made disciples. He didn't just pull 12 people into a room and say, let's keep working on you. He didn't come up with a 12-week growth plan and then follow that up with a good old-fashioned Methodist casserole, although those are good too. He simply said, follow me. And then he walked straight into the middle of broken and messy and complicated people, and he invited his disciples to watch and then do the same. Discipleship in the Bible always moves outward. It's never just internal renovation. It's always internal renovation for the sake of external mission. We grow so that we can go. We are filled so that we can pour out, just like we talked about last week. We are salted so that we can season, and we are lit so we can illuminate. Discipleship that never moves outward isn't discipleship at all. It's just self-improvement with better vocabulary. And it's not doing a whole lot of people a whole lot of good. Then look at verse 16, because this is where Jesus lands the whole thing. He says, "In the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father in heaven." See, friends, the end goal isn't our reputation. It's not about us being impressive with how holy we are. It's not about a platform. It's not about some spiritual impact score. The end goal is so that people see our lives and then it points them somewhere. It makes them curious. It raises a question in them that only God can answer. We are not the destination. We're just the sign that points to the destination. But here's the thing, we're not responsible for manufacturing this saltiness. It's not up to us to have our lives figured out to impress other people. Otherwise, that just becomes another thing on our checklist. We can't become salty on our own, and we can't generate light on our own. That's not how it works. Left to ourselves, we default to comfort, and we default to self-protection. It's just the human condition, and no amount of trying harder is going to fix that. The only reason that any of this is possible is because of what Jesus did on the cross. The cross is where God's light entered the darkest place that had ever existed. Jesus didn't just decide to stay in heaven when the world was broken. He came. He stepped into the rot and became the preserving force. He walked into the darkness and he became light. The Apostle John says it this way in John chapter 1. He says, "In him was life, and that life was the light of men. That light shines in the darkness, and yet the darkness did not overcome it." And because Jesus rose, and because he lives, and because his Spirit now lives in everyone who has said yes to him, we're not trying to generate something from scratch here. We get to carry something that is already alive inside of us. We were not saved to blend in. We were saved to shine out. So here's how we put this into practice, because go be salty this week sounds great on a bumper sticker, but that's not really an action. So here's the assignment. Earlier this year, our church launched a campaign called Who's Your One, where we identified one person that we could pray for earnestly and honestly who doesn't know Christ and doesn't have a relationship with him. If you haven't named your one, today is a great day to do that. And then this week, I want you to do one intentional, visible thing in that person's direction. It does not have to be a gospel presentation or a conversation that you've been rehearsing for 3 years in your head, just one move, one intentional act of presence. Maybe it's showing up with a meal, or maybe just a text that says, "Hey, I've been thinking about you." Maybe it's showing up somewhere that you normally wouldn't because they need somebody and you are that somebody. Salt doesn't have to be dramatic to be effective, and light doesn't have to be blinding to light the way. It just has to show up. Now listen, I know some of you hear that and you're already trying to talk yourself out of it. There's no way. I'm not well-spoken enough. I don't know what I'm doing here. I don't know how to have these conversations. Maybe you think you're not qualified enough, or you don't want to be preachy or pushy, and you're afraid of rejection, and all of those things are very real. I don't discount that at all. However, here's what I want to encourage you with. There are people in your life who are already watching you. And you didn't start that. It's just how life works. They are paying attention to how you handle pressure and how you treat people when you're tired and how you responded to that hard thing that happened in your life. We're already being a witness to something in our life. We just have to decide if it's worth following. And maybe for some of you, the assignment is different. You might be sitting here today and you're not far from Jesus because you walked away. Maybe you're sitting here and realizing you've just never accepted him to begin with. You've never accepted that invitation to come close. Maybe you've been in church your whole life and you know all the songs and all the words to say and when to say amen and when to stand up and when to sit down. Or maybe this is your first time in church and you're listening to some weirdo talk about getting salty and lit. Either way, don't. Either way, I want you to hear this. The gospel, I think I just lost the room. Just go ahead, just get it out. Hear this. The gospel is not a membership. It's not some country club that you have to pay your dues to and hope that you show up enough and do all the right things. It's not a tradition that you inherit. It is a person, and he is alive. He died for you to have a relationship with you, and he is close to you right now. You don't have to figure out how to be salt and light today. You just have to say yes to the one who already is. And then you start letting him make you into something that you can't make on your own. Being a Christian is not about being perfect. And if you're unsure about that, just look around this room. There's a bunch of imperfect Christians here. Being a Christian is about saying yes to a relationship with the one who is perfect. So I want to paint you a picture of what this can look like this week if we take this call seriously. We have people in this room who work in hospitals, who sit at bedsides with people. We have teachers who stand in front of classrooms full of kids who are looking for a stable adult, somebody who is genuinely for them. We have people here who work in construction and office suites and stores and restaurants who spend 40 hours a week with people who are lonely and anxious and exhausted and who have never once seen what it looks like to have a peace that doesn't make any sense. There are people who live within a half mile of somebody who hasn't been inside of a church in 20 years, but they just might show up if somebody they know and trust were to invite them. That's not a fancy program or a church outreach strategy. It's just you showing up and being present, letting what's real in here become visible out there. And that's important because discipleship does grow in here, but it goes out there. And all we have to do is take the opportunity to shine that light in a darkness by being who God created us to be. You know, that kid at the Best Buy checkout counter, I've thought about him a lot since that day. I don't know his name or his story. I don't know if anybody ever went back and showed him something real, but I do know this. He deserved better than what he got that day. He deserved to truly see Jesus. He deserved to have somebody stand next to him with presence, somebody to say, hey, I'm sorry, but what that lady did was not okay, and she does not represent who Jesus is. He deserves salt and light. And I walked out. Now, I don't share that story with you for your pity or to beat myself up. I've made peace with that moment. But I'm telling you this because I think a lot of us have a version of that story. A moment where we had the opportunity and the chance to show up and say something, but we chose to stay invisible instead. But church, today is not that day. We have the opportunity before us to be salt and light to a world that desperately needs it. There are 100,000 people within just a few mile drive of this property that we have the opportunity to be salt and light to. We weren't saved to blend in. We were saved to shine out. The only thing that we have left to do at this point is to go.